Welcome to the Cheating Secrets channel. Why does a married woman decide to cheat? A woman who has a good home, a loving husband, and 2 wonderful children. After 15 years of a happy marriage. Why? I kept asking myself this as I read the private investigator's report and looked through the photos included in it. Why? I kept asking myself, and the only thing I could come up with was that she had some kind of mental breakdown. Did she love him? According to the report, they met only for sex. No sane woman would risk everything she has for a few minutes of sinful pleasure. Mental illness. That's the only explanation I could give as the tears streamed down my face. The detective left me alone in the empty office to read the report, knowing I would need privacy to process what was written and deal with the emotions it would inevitably stir. I went through the photos and noticed how shamelessly she was indulging in sex with her lover. I recognized him as Chad Wilkins, an employee at the real estate agency where she worked as an agent. They met a couple of times a week at Motel 6 by the interstate and sometimes in our home, in the guest bedroom. That's where he got the pictures, so there would be no issues with privacy when it came to the divorce court. When the detective first saw them entering our house, he installed mini cameras and audio tapes in various rooms. Now I had to figure out how and when to handle it. I was firmly resolved that I would have to divorce her. I could not bear the thought of her cheating on me and expecting me to turn the other cheek. My name is Frank Noland. I'm 43 years old, and I manage a supermarket. The job sometimes requires long hours away from my family, and perhaps that contributed to my wife losing her way, I thought. But damn it, that wasn't a reason I could accept. My wife's name is Joan. She's 42. We met in college, and from our first date, no other woman existed for me. I loved her and trusted her throughout our married life. As I mentioned, she works as a real estate agent and spends a lot of time out of the office, as does Chad, and I think that's what gave them the opportunity to carry on their affair. Chad is around our age and is married to Mona, a very nice, pleasant woman, and they also have 2 children about the same age as ours. I met them at various family events hosted by the real estate company and always thought they were a good family. I thought the divorce could be handled very amicably, citing irreconcilable differences as the reason, if she agreed to cooperate. We earned about the same, so there shouldn't be any alimony, and if our 14-year-old son Jeremy moved in with me while our 12-year-old daughter Kim stayed with her mother, there wouldn't be any child support either. The house would have to be sold, and all the assets divided equally. If she didn't agree to this, I would threaten her with a divorce for infidelity, and the report with all the photos, audio recordings, and videos would be made public. I thought about Chad and how this would affect his family, but I didn't know yet how to deal with that issue. I figured when the time was right, I would take the evidence I had and give it to his wife, leaving her to decide what to do. I knew it would devastate her as much as it had devastated me, but she deserved to know the truth about the man she was married to, and I wanted revenge for what he had done to my family. At that moment, there was a knock on the door, and the detective walked in. "How are you doing, Mr. Noland? Do you have any questions about the material?" "No, probably not. Everything here is just as I expected," I replied sadly. "Would you like to watch the videos or listen to the audio recordings? It might give you a better idea of how things unfolded." "No, thank you. I don't want to see anything more than what's already shown in the photos," I replied. I really couldn't accept what I had seen, as she had completely given herself to another man. So I stood up and prepared to leave. On my way out, I wrote the detective a check for the remaining balance and, taking his report with the photos, audio, and video recordings, walked out of the office. Stopping in a park not far from our home, I reflected on the events that led me to uncover my soon-to-be ex-wife's infidelity. I didn't want to enter the house we once called home because I could no longer think of it as our home. It was just a place where we ate and slept. I decided I would try to keep the family together as long as possible for the sake of the kids, as they needed stability. Joan is an attractive woman and stays in shape through exercise and activities related to her job. She's by no means slim after having children, but I noticed she had lost a little weight and seemed very tired lately, which I attributed to a new diet. She still seemed very sweet to me. Our sex life had been frequent until a few weeks ago and very loving, though mostly gentle, sticking to the missionary position and rarely or never exploring other kinds of sex. I had thought about talking to her about spicing up our sex life, but always feared how she might react to some of my fantasies. I didn't immediately realize that the frequency of our sex had decreased, but looking back, I can see that she didn't want to have sex with me on the days she was with Chad. But the rest of the time, our lovemaking continued as usual. It wasn't until I accidentally saw the bank statement for her personal card and notice charges at our local Motel 6 that I became suspicious and decided to investigate. The result was the private detective's report. Maybe I should have confronted her about it right away, but if she was cheating, I wanted it documented. It was very expensive, and I had to dip into our retirement savings to pay for it. I figured that if what I suspected turned out to be true, I wouldn't need to worry about growing old together. What bothered me the most was that she never seemed to change her loving attitude toward me, even while she was having an affair. I wondered how she could be so two-faced, acting as if nothing in her life had changed. She must be a good actress, I thought. From what she did with Chad, it was clear she had lost her love and respect for me as a husband and lover, and she had to be punished for her deceitful behavior. As I sat in the park, the same one we had taken our children to so many times as they grew up, I felt my eyes fill with tears again, and my thoughts drifted back to the 15 years I had believed were a perfect marriage. How could she have given up so easily? I quietly sobbed, leaning my head back on the park bench until I finally pulled myself together. Another thought came to mind. If she truly has a mental illness, could I stay with her? Our wedding vows included the words, "in sickness and in health." Mental illness is a sickness. Could I stay in the marriage to honor that vow if she ended her affair? But the wedding vows also included the words, "and forsaking all others," and she certainly hadn't done that. I decided that I could never trust her again, and if I couldn't trust her, even if it was caused by illness, I couldn't live with her. How could I keep an eye on her while also working? So divorce was the only solution. Then I considered how to handle the divorce with minimal impact on the children and without a serious confrontation with her. But first, I needed to find and talk to a divorce lawyer. Using my cell phone, I called our attorney to get a recommendation. Jerry was surprised when I told him what I needed, but he gave me a name, Ron Jenkins, and a phone number. Before hanging up, I asked him to rewrite my will, excluding Joan and naming our children as the sole beneficiaries. I immediately called and scheduled a meeting with the divorce lawyer for the next morning. I then decided to return home and try to act normal for a few more days. When I got home, Joan hadn't arrived yet, but the kids were already back from school and doing their homework. I was proud that they had trained themselves, with a little help, to start on it as soon as they got home from school. "Dad," Kim asked, "what are you doing home so early?" "I had some errands to run, and after that, I just came home to check on you guys." "Oh, Dad, you know how hardworking we are," she replied with a mischievous smile as we hugged. She was a wonderful daughter, and I knew I would miss her when I parted ways with her mother. "Oh, right. Has your mom come home yet?" "No," she called and said she had a showing and would be a little late. "She's bringing home Chinese for dinner." "Sounds good. Is Jeremy upstairs in his room?" "Yep." As I went upstairs and knocked on Jeremy's door, I wondered if Joan had met with Chad that afternoon at Motel 6. I had all the information I needed for the divorce, so I was no longer tracking her affair. Jeremy opened the door, and I ruffled his hair and hugged him. "What's up, Dad?" "Nothing, Ja. Just letting you know I'm home. How's school?" "Good. No complaints." We chatted for a few more minutes, and then I went downstairs and made myself my favorite drink, whiskey on the rocks, while waiting for Joan to come home. She arrived about half an hour later, looking a little tired and pale, even slightly grayer, and due to her recent weight loss, her dress hung loosely on her. She went upstairs and called Jeremy for dinner before turning to me with a smile that lit up her whole face. "How was my dear husband's day?" she asked, kissing me on the cheek. "Great," I replied, kissing her back. "Are we grumbling about something today?" she asked, with a questioning look on her face. "No, I'm fine, honey. Just a stressful day," I answered, trying to sound a bit more cheerful. She looked at me with a strange expression, almost guilty, or so it seemed to me, then turned and walked back to the kitchen. I finished my whiskey and went to the kitchen to help her set the table while Kim was pouring water into the glasses. Joan seemed to love me just as much as ever, and it really puzzled me why she suddenly felt the need for extra sex and the risk of destroying our marriage. We enjoyed dinner together while Joan told us about the showing that had delayed her. It seemed like it was a pretty big deal, and her commission could be significant. I didn't know, and I didn't care, whether it was a real showing or if she had just been fooling around with her lover instead. I was past caring, but I tried not to reveal my inner feelings for the kids' sake while we ate. Afterward, the kids cleaned up the kitchen, and while Joan was upstairs changing into something more comfortable, I went to the living room to watch the news. I heard the shower running upstairs and wondered if she was washing off her lover's scent, preparing to have guilty sex with me tonight. I was starting to go crazy over her affair and thinking about the right way to get revenge. That night, she tried to initiate sex, but I pushed her away and turned my back. I pretended to be asleep and heard her sigh as she turned away. The next morning, I got up early and left the house before everyone else. I left a note explaining that I had an important project to finish today and needed to start early. It was really difficult for me to function normally around Joan, and I needed some time to myself. I finally started working and managed to get some things done before I had to head to my meeting with the divorce lawyer. When I arrived at his office, I had a copy of the private investigator's report with me. His secretary immediately showed me to his office, and after introducing myself, I explained my situation. He looked through the photos, read the report, and agreed that it was a reasonable plan and could be handled easily if she agreed. If not, the report, photos, and other evidence would be laid out on the table. I asked him when he would be ready to serve her with the divorce notice, and he replied that it would take a couple of days. That's how long it would take to prepare the paperwork, file it with the court, and then prepare copies for service. I asked if he could include one of the photos of her and chat with the divorce papers so she would immediately know the reason. He promised he would do that and would call me as soon as the papers were ready. I left and headed home. Now I had to decide how to break the news to Jeremy and Kim. I was certain that the sudden breakup of the family, without any warning, would devastate them. I couldn't warn them in advance, as Joan would find out before she was served, and part of my revenge was for her to be served right at work. I think the fact that I knew about her affair would be a complete shock to her. The divorce notice, combined with that knowledge, would force her to suddenly realize what she had lost. It might also signal to Chad that his marriage could be in jeopardy too if he's there or hears about it. The kids were my biggest concern, and I needed to figure out how to gently explain our separation to them. I spent the rest of the day looking for a furnished apartment that I could temporarily call home until I found something more permanent. Finally, I found a place and put down a deposit to hold it for a few days, then headed home. When I arrived, Joan was already there, cooking dinner. She smiled and kissed me warmly. God, I thought, this woman can act this way, and if she can do it, so can I. I returned her kiss with some passion. Easy, big boy. Wait until tonight, and I'll give you what you're looking for. Kim, who was doing her homework at the dining table, groaned in disgust. Mom, that's gross. Sorry, honey. Mom got carried away for a moment, Joan laughed. I wondered if I could stomach making love to her, but she might start to get suspicious if I didn't respond to her sexual advances. I had put her off last night, but I couldn't postpone it for 2 nights without an explanation. What's for dinner? I asked, still holding her by the waist. It'll be burnt chicken and biscuits if you don't let go of me, she replied with a smile as she returned to cooking. That night, as we were getting ready for bed, I was afraid to have sex with her. I really didn't want to, but for the success of my plan, I had to try. She slid into bed naked, anticipating our lovemaking, and her body aroused me as it always did, but I noticed that she looked thinner. I was about to ask her why she was dieting when she grabbed me and brought her mouth to mine. What followed was much more passionate sex than we had ever had before, and nothing like what I had seen in the photos with Chad, though it wasn't as wild as what I saw in the pictures. When we finished, she relaxed in my arms. Oh, Frank, I really do love you. You'll never know how much, she whispered, kissing me back. This was too much, I thought. She's cheating on me, and at the same time confessing her love. I'm the most loved cuckold ever. What kind of glorious horns can he get? Well, Soon she'll find out how much she loves me. It's a shame, though, because she has such a nice ass. I love you too, honey. She snuggled up to me, and we fell asleep together. The next day and night were a repeat of that night, and I knew it would be the last sex she would ever get from me, so I did my best to please her. I even added a few things I'd seen in the photos. When I finished, she collapsed in my arms. Oh, Frank. Oh, my dear. That was amazing. You are my greatest love, and I want to tell you that you're the best lover in the world. I couldn't let that slide. I love you too, honey, but how do you know I'm the best lover in the world? How many guys have you slept with? She hesitated for a moment before answering, and I could almost hear the gears turning as she tried to come up with the right response. You're the only one, my dear. I said that because I can't imagine making love any better. Good answer. Quick thinking. Well, tomorrow you'll get my response, adulteress, I thought. Just before I fell asleep, she asked me a question. Frank? Yeah? Can we have some time alone on Saturday morning? I need to tell you something. I'll take the kids to my parents' place, and we can sit and talk for a bit. What the hell? Is she going to confess? Well, too late for that, sweetheart. Of course I'm fine. What's going on? I'll tell you on Saturday. All right. After that, I had a hard time falling asleep, thinking about what was likely going to happen tomorrow and how I was going to handle it. I wondered how she was going to frame her confession. She would probably make it all my fault. Damn, I was the best lover in the world, and she loved me. So how could it be my fault? The next morning, I got up early again and went to a diner for breakfast because I didn't want to see or talk to her anymore. It was over now. Later, when I got to work, I called the lawyer to check on the status of the divorce papers, and he told me they had been prepared the day before and were ready to be served. I arranged for them to be served to Joan at 3 p.m., giving me time to take care of necessary things. Then I took the whole day off. Before leaving, I told my secretary that if my wife called, I was out on business. When I got home, Joan had already left for work and the kids were at school, so I changed into my work clothes and then rented a small truck from U-Haul. When I got back home, I started loading my personal belongings, clothes, computer, etc. I even hauled my favorite chair into the truck and got ready to head to the apartment I had rented. Just as I was getting into the taxi, the neighbor came over to see what was going on. Frank, she asked, are you guys moving? No, just me. What's going on? Are you having problems? Joan found other interests, so I guess it's time for me to move on. Oh, that's awful, but I can't imagine Joan doing anything to ruin your marriage. Well, you can talk to her when she gets home tonight. I'm not sticking around. See you, Alice. I drove off, leaving her with a puzzled expression on her face. I knew that by the end of the day, most of the neighbors would have heard that Joan had cheated on me, and I had left her. Alice was the neighborhood gossip. After unloading the truck at my new place, I returned it and picked up my car. When I got back to the apartment, I tidied up, took a shower, and changed clothes. After lunch, I went to our bank, withdrew half the money from our joint account, and transferred it to my own account. Then I spent a couple of hours taking care of insurance and other things that needed to be updated. At 2:30, I drove to the middle school where the kids studied and waited for them to come out. It took a few minutes to pick up the kids before they got on the school bus, and both of them were puzzled by my presence as we headed home. Why did you pick us up, Dad? What's going on? Kim asked. I'll tell you in a minute, sweetheart, I said as I pulled into the park near our house and parked the car. Kim was sitting in the front seat next to me, and Jeremy was in the back when I turned to face them. Both looked very confused. Kim, it's very hard for me to tell you this, but I've left your mother. You'll be staying with her until we figure out custody, but I have my own apartment now, and I won't be living at home anymore. Why, Dad? Kim exclaimed, tears in her eyes. Why can't you be with us anymore? Jeremy just muttered, oh, damn, and turned away so we couldn't see his tears. I'm really sorry, guys, and I can't explain the reason, but you need to remember that we both love you and will always be there for you. You'll both need to support your mom and be there for her, but our marriage is broken, and I don't think it can be fixed. We'll still be your mom and dad, but we won't be together. Now Kim was openly crying, and I reached out and tried to hug her over the console. It was unbearable to see my little girl cry. Why did Joan do this to us? I asked myself. Look at what she's doing to our kids. Finally, a bit of calm returned, and I drove them back to the house where I no longer lived. Before leaving them there, I hugged them both. Tears were still running down their faces, and mine too. You guys go and do your homework and try to keep your minds busy. Mom will be home soon, and I don't think she'll be too happy, so be ready to support her. If you need anything, you can call me on my cell, and I'll call you on yours to check on how you're doing. I'm really sorry about this, but sometimes things happen that we have no control over, and this is one of those times. I left them and headed to my place. Glancing at the clock, I saw it was already past 3. Joan should have received the bad news by now. It was around 5 p.m. that same day when my cell phone rang. I checked the caller ID and saw it was a relative calling. With some hesitation, I picked up the phone. Hello? Frank? I heard my father-in-law, Sam, speaking. Yes, Sam. What can I do for you? I liked Sam. We had always gotten along well. Frank, Joan is in the hospital. In the hospital? Yes, they brought her in from work. She collapsed there a couple of hours ago, right after she was served the divorce papers. She asked us to call you. What the hell is going on, Frank? Sam, she was cheating on me, and I found out. Oh damn, are you sure? That doesn't sound like her. I have a private investigator's report, photos, videos, and audio. It's all clear. Oh damn, this is going to destroy her mother. How is Joan? She was in severe shock, but I also found out something else. She's dying. The words, she's dying, seemed to stun me for a moment before I responded, asking for clarification. What do you mean, she's dying? She has terminal pancreatic cancer. She only has a few weeks left to live. My God, I didn't know that, Sam. She never told me. How long has she known? She's pretty sedated, but she managed to say about 3 months. She's really distraught. Can you come to the hospital? I think she wants to see you. My mind was in turmoil. Joan in a terminal stage? What was I about to do? Damn, I already told the kids I was leaving her. The kids, oh damn, they're home alone. I'll come as soon as I can, but I need to take care of the kids. They're home by themselves. Where are you? I'm at my apartment. You planned this in advance? Yes, I wanted her to feel the same pain she caused me. I loved that woman and trusted her. There's no excuse for breaking the vows we made before God. I think I can understand that. Now I need to get home. How long are they going to keep her there? At least overnight. They want to monitor her. Is it okay if I bring the kids tonight? I think she'd prefer they stay away. She'll be going home tomorrow, and she'll be able to handle it better then. Are you coming here tonight? It's a mess. I don't know what to do now. I'll have to stay with the kids tonight. Tell her we'll talk tomorrow. I'll take the kids to school, and then I'll come to see her. Okay, Frank. I'll tell her. We'll stay with her until she falls asleep. After hanging up, I got into the car and headed home. While I was driving, my phone rang. It was Kim calling. Hi, Kim. Dad, Mom isn't home yet. Did something happen to her? I'm on my way home now, sweetheart. I'll explain everything when I get there. It'll just take a few minutes. Okay, see you soon. God, what am I going to tell the kids? This was such a mess. Why didn't she tell me she was terminally ill? Maybe that somehow explains why she had the affair. She must have started it after she got the diagnosis. No wonder she was losing weight and always feeling tired. As I pulled up to the house, Kim ran out to greet me. Jeremy stood in the doorway, watching. Dad, where's Mom? She's in the hospital, sweetie. She fainted, and they took her in for some tests. Grandpa Sam called, and she's fine, so don't worry. We'll see her tomorrow when she comes home. They're just keeping her overnight to make sure she's okay. I took her hand, and we went inside. I put my arm around Jeremy's shoulders to comfort him. He seemed to appreciate the gesture. How about we go out to eat somewhere, guys? After dinner at our favorite pizzeria, we came back home. I called Sam to check on Joan, and he said she was sleeping peacefully and that they were getting ready to head home. I told him again that I would come by in the morning and bring her home. We had things to talk about. He agreed with me. Before the kids went to bed, Jeremy asked, "Are you coming back home, Dad?" I thought for a moment before answering. "It looks like I'll have to. You guys plan on going to school tomorrow, and then I'll probably bring your mom home. Tomorrow evening, we'll have a family talk." "Okay." "Yeah, everything's fine." Kim, who had been listening, asked, "Do you still love Mom, Dad?" "I've always loved your mom, sweetheart. It's just that something happened that made it so I couldn't live here anymore, but I might have to come back to help your mom for a while." I hugged them both before they went off to their rooms. After they left, I poured myself a drink and sat in front of the TV for a while, staring at the empty screen. Yes, I would have to come back home. If she's dying, she won't be able to take care of the house and the kids. We would need to talk tomorrow, before the kids came home, to sort out the living arrangements. I thought there had to be a connection between her affair and the news that her life was coming to an end. Maybe I would finally learn the why. I had an endless list of things to do, including canceling the divorce proceedings. There was no point in divorcing someone who was terminally ill. I would also have to give up the apartment. God, why didn't she tell me? Why keep this a secret? We could have figured something out. Thinking about her, about our 15 years together, and the fact that I might lose her, I felt a deep sadness. Maybe it was the alcohol, but it was as if a wave of grief suddenly washed over me. It had been such a stressful day, and the way it ended must have been too much because I felt tears running down my cheeks. In my rush for revenge, I had pushed forward without talking to her or facing her directly. Now I would have to take the time to find out why. There was nowhere else for us to go if she only had a few weeks left to live. Her actions, breaking our wedding vows, meant I didn't have to uphold my commitments to our marriage, but I couldn't abandon her now. I still had responsibilities as a person and a parent. The next morning, I got up early and got the kids ready for school. Kim was excited about seeing her mom when she got home from school. "Do you know how Mom's feeling this morning, Dad?" "I haven't had time to call yet, sweetheart, but I'm sure if there were a problem, they would have called us. Are you all set for school?" "Yeah, my backpack is ready." "Good. The bus will be here in a few minutes. Are you all set, J?" "Yeah, I'm ready." "All right, see you later. Have a good day." When they left, I stood on the porch, watching as the bus pulled up, and then went back into the house. Before picking up Joan, I needed to bring my things back home, so I called the truck rental and booked the same truck. They promised to have it ready when I arrived. I called the hospital and asked for Joan's room. She was having breakfast when I called, but she started crying as soon as she heard my voice. "Oh, Frank, I'm so sorry. Can we talk?" "I'll pick you up around noon, Joan. I have something to take care of first, and when we get home, we can talk." "Oh yes, the doctor said I can go home this morning. I'm so sore. Save it until we're home, Joan. I'll see you later," I gently interrupted. "All right," I heard in a faint, tearful voice. I put on my work clothes and headed to U-Haul to get the truck. It took me just under 2 hours to move my things back home. Then I took a shower, changed clothes again, and returned the truck. After that, I took my car and drove to the hospital. Joan was waiting for me, dressed and sitting in a wheelchair in the hospital lobby. Her parents were with her, and I was shocked by her appearance. Since I had seen her the morning before, she looked as if she had aged 10 years. Her eyes were red and swollen from crying, and her complexion had turned almost a grayish yellow. However, I made myself refrain from hugging her. "Are you ready to go?" "Yes, they discharged me just a little while ago. I was just waiting for you," she sobbed. "Then let's go," I said with some kindness in my voice, as I didn't want her to start a scene in the hospital lobby. "Let's go home." At that moment, Sam spoke up. "She's our daughter, but she's your wife, and we gave her to you in marriage. If your marriage is over, we'd like her to come back to us." "I hear you, Sam, and I acknowledge my responsibilities as a husband, even though your daughter broke our marital contract. We'll talk when we get home, and I'll let you know." "All right, Frank. If you go get your car, I'll bring Joan out when you get back." "Thank you," I replied, running outside to get my car. Later, as we were driving home, Joan started speaking. "Frank, I'm so sorry. I know there's nothing I can say to show you how much I regret this." "Joan, why don't you wait until we get home? We'll have time to talk before the kids get back." "Are you going to throw me out, Frank?" "No. If you're as sick as your father says, we'll stay together. This is going to be very hard for Jeremy and Kim. I've already told them we're separating, but I didn't explain why. I rented an apartment and moved out yesterday, but this morning I came back home. I think the most important thing you'll need to explain to me is why. Why did you do this? And why did you do things with Chad that you never did with me? I think I deserve an answer, and when we get home, I want you to tell me why. If your father didn't tell you, I hired a private detective, and I have his report with photos, videos, and audio recordings of you meeting with Chad in our guest room. So you can't say anything to deny the affair." Joan just sat in the passenger seat, her head down, quietly crying. "All right, Frank, I'll try to explain." We drove in silence, except for her sobbing, until we got home. I helped her inside and up to our bedroom, where she said she wanted to take a shower and change before we sat down to talk. While she did that, I prepared us some soup and sandwiches for lunch. After lunch, we sat at the kitchen table, facing each other. "Go ahead, Joan. I want to hear it now, before the kids get home." "All right. I don't know if you remember, but about 3 months ago, I started having stomach pains, which I thought were indigestion or heartburn. Well, after a couple of weeks, when the pain didn't stop and I couldn't relieve it with antacids, I went to our family doctor, and he sent me for tests and a CT scan. I did all of this without telling you because I didn't want to worry you or the kids unnecessarily. My job allows me to leave the office during work hours, and I took advantage of that. When he got the results, he arranged for me to see a specialist. The specialist ran more tests and eventually told me that I had pancreatic cancer and that there wasn't much they could do for me. He said it was caught too late for treatment to be effective and that I only had a few weeks left to live. I was finally going to tell you this Saturday. It killed me to think that I would be leaving you, Jeremy, and Kim. I didn't know what to do or how to tell you or the kids. One thing that kept running through my mind was that I was still so young and hadn't truly lived yet. Sometimes, when you weren't around, I would go on adult websites and watch some of the sexual activities that really turned me on. I always wanted to try some of them, but I never told you because I was afraid you would lose respect for me. I wanted your memory of me to remain untarnished by thoughts that I was some kind of pervert. So, I was in a terrible dilemma, and my judgment was clouded by the thought that my time was running out fast. I wanted to experience being an adulteress before I died, and I should have talked to you. But I didn't want you to remember me that way. I knew Chad was into adult films because I once overheard him talking with a couple of other guys in the office when they didn't know I could hear them. One day, I worked up the courage and asked him about it, and he admitted that he had a bunch of videos he could show me. So, one afternoon, we went to his place, and he played some X-rated videos. They aroused me so much that we ended up doing it. It wasn't as good as I had hoped, and not nearly as good as when we were together, but I kept hoping it would get better. We even did it in our guest room a couple of times. As you know, I would never let him in our bed. The last time we did it in the guest room, I tried to make it as good as what I had seen in the videos, but I couldn't enjoy it, and I finally realized it would never get better, so I ended things with him. I know I acted terribly selfishly, not thinking about you or our children. My only excuse is that when I found out I only had a few weeks or months to live, my mind went blank, and I could only think about myself. Now I want to sincerely apologize and ask for the chance to return home and spend the rest of my time with my family. I will never be able to make up for what I've done, and I have no right to expect you to forgive me, but I still hope that one day you might. I know the respect you had for me, which I tried so hard to preserve, is completely gone because of my actions. When I started the affair, I hoped I could act like an adulteress and keep it a secret because I knew if you found out, you would leave. I'm ready to accept any punishment you deem fit because I need to cleanse my soul of the sins I've committed. You are the only one I love and respect more than anything in the world, and I need your punishment as my absolution. I sat there for a few minutes, looking at her after she finished. She lowered her head, staring at the table, waiting for my response. Finally, I decided what I had to say in response to her confession. Joan, I'm so disappointed by what you did and by the fact that you didn't come to me, completely shutting me out of your thoughts and your life. I can understand the shock of being told about your impending death, but cutting me off completely because you wanted to do something you were afraid I would find offensive is beyond my understanding. I would have agreed to anything you wanted. My love for you would have outweighed any thoughts of holding back from anything you needed. I'm your husband, and when we married, we became one, with love as the binding force holding us together. I should have been there to support you in everything you wanted to do. It seems almost funny now, but during our marriage, I wanted to try different kinds of sex with you, but I was afraid you would reject me and lose respect for me. Now I know we had the same desires, but we never told each other, and this is where it has led us. As they say, that's all water under the bridge now, and yes, I want you to stay here, at home, with us for as long as possible. You made a terrible mistake, one I'm struggling to forgive, but now I understand the reason behind your actions a little better, and maybe that will help me cope with it. Perhaps you should sleep in the guest room until the dust settles a bit. I'll probably need to hire someone to come in and do the laundry, cooking, cleaning, and so on. We might eventually have to convert the dining room into a bedroom for you when you're no longer able to climb the stairs, but I'll take care of that later. Thank you, Frank. I appreciate being here with my family, and I'll try not to be a burden. I don't want you to think that you'll be a burden. This is our responsibility, and we will do everything necessary to support you. You're my wife, and you're their mother, and nothing, neither time nor money, will be wasted. Thank you, dear, she said, gently reaching across the table to take my hand. When the kids find out about your condition, it will be hard for them. My decision to leave you has already hit them hard. I told them we would have a family meeting to discuss everything when they get home from school. Her face grew sad again as she thought about our children. I guess we need to do that. They're old enough, but this will be tough, especially for Kim, she admitted, continuing to hold my hand. I didn't pull away from her. The meeting with the kids took place shortly after they got home from school. Kim expressed her joy at her mother's return, while Jeremy was less demonstrative but seemed relieved to see her again. They both wanted to know if we were still angry with each other and if we were back together for good. We reassured them that Mom was home for good, but that there were still some issues in our relationship that needed to be worked out, and she would be sleeping in the guest room for a while. I assured them that the issues would be resolved soon, and they seemed satisfied with that. I knew it was my responsibility to lead the family discussion, which wasn't going to be pleasant, but it was something we had to go through and leave behind in order to move forward. You know, guys, there are a few more changes we need to talk about. Your mom won't be going back to work. She'll be staying home, and we'll all need to help her as much as we can. Soon, we'll hire someone to come and help while I'm at work and you're at school, so Mom won't be alone. Kim, initially confused, was the first to speak. Are you sick, Mom? Joan, sitting next to Kim, wrapped her arm around her shoulders. Yes, sweetheart, I'm sick, and it's going to get worse. Kim's eyes widened as she realized what her mother was telling her. What is it, Mom? It's cancer, and it can't be cured. You're not going to get better? The realization dawned on Kim's face, and I heard Jeremy mutter, "Oh, damn." Tears welled up in Kim's eyes and began streaming down her cheeks. Are you going to die, Mom? Yes, that's right. We all die someday, and my time has come early. God is calling me home to be with him. Kim turned, buried her face in Joan's shoulder, and hugged her around the neck, crying. I don't want you to die. You can't die. I won't let you. Joan held Kim as I turned to Jeremy. Tears ran down his cheeks as I pulled him into a hug. What's wrong with Mom? He choked out. Cancer, pancreatic cancer. There's nothing they can do. Needless to say, there was a lot of crying and praying over the next hour before any sort of reluctant acceptance was reached. Kim still refused to believe that her mother was going to leave her, and I knew she would need strong support from another woman when Joan was gone. Finally, in an attempt to restore some semblance of normal family life, I called and ordered pizza. Kim sat on her mother's lap, hugging her tightly and sobbing, while Joan tried to comfort her as we waited for the pizza to arrive. I was amazed at how well Joan was holding it together, but I knew she was a good mother and would be there for her kids as long as she could. Tears were running down my cheeks as well. After a couple of days, we had somewhat come to terms with our situation. Our parents, brothers, and sisters had been informed, and they gathered to offer support. Joan's mother, Marge, moved in with us and took over the household duties. Naturally, Joan had to give up the guest room to her mother, and I was glad about that. I missed having her in our bed and realized that making her stay in the guest room was just petty revenge on a terminally ill woman, and I couldn't justify that to myself. The first night we spent together was unforgettable. There were no longer any boundaries that had haunted us throughout our married life, and Joan was deeply remorseful and wanted to make it special for me. My emotions were conflicted because she had done some of these things first with another man during our marriage. Still, I thought about how little time she had left. Knowing her love for me and our 15 years of marriage, I decided to give her the intimacy, both in lust and in love, that she craved. Her body was thinner, but she was still beautiful when she came to bed. What started as a soft kiss soon turned into something much more passionate. We shared an intense and deep connection, something new between us. It was one of the most exciting experiences we'd ever had together. She was catching her breath, tears in her eyes, and I became concerned. "Are you okay, love? Should I stop?" "Oh no, don't stop. I feel so happy. Please keep going." A soft sound escaped her as we continued, and she looked at me with such adoration. That was wonderful, so wonderful. We said things we had never spoken before, completely free in that moment, and it felt like nothing was holding us back. Our connection reached a new height, and I felt an overwhelming sense of joy. As we relaxed, I gently kissed her lips, and she began to cry. "Oh, my dear husband, I've never felt anything like that before. I was so foolish not to come to you sooner. I'm so sorry," she said through tears. "My love, I also should have shared my thoughts with you. If I had, maybe things would have been different. Let's just focus on the time we have left together." We had a few more moments like this, but after a couple of weeks, her energy started to fade as the illness progressed. I held her close as she rested, regretting the time we had lost by not opening up to each other sooner. I forgave her for the past, understanding that in her situation, anyone might have made similar choices. I, too, had my own dreams that I wished I had explored before it was too late. Joan lived for another month, and eventually, they gave her such strong sedatives that she simply slipped away from us. I was there, holding her hand as she passed. Even though her death was expected, I was still heartbroken for quite some time. Fortunately, Marge stayed with us for a while after the funeral, but eventually, she had to go home to take care of Sam. I hired a housekeeper to come in, cook dinner, and clean. The kids and I learned how to do laundry, so we've managed to get by. Before she died, Joan told me to find another wife, because Kim needed another woman she could trust and who would guide her, and I needed a companion too. I'm still looking, and I'm still thinking about whether or not to ruin Chad's happy home. I'll let him sweat a little longer. Thank you for listening until the end. See you in the next episode of Cheating Secrets. Take care of yourself and your loved ones. Goodbye.